So with files, there are ways in which we could use Java to actually, read in files and write to files. It could be a nice way to, help automate certain things, or even keep data for ourselves in kind of an external source. So at least here we're just going to work with text files, but this could also work for any files in which you could actually, access and put text into it. So at least here, we're going to use something. Let's actually go up here and we're going to import Java IO. Everything from Java IO. So IO means input output. So these are classes that are going to be related to being able to handle some kind of an input and output. Let's go ahead and start creating a try catch statement for what we're about to do. So we're just going to do a try, and then we're going to do a catch. Just some kind of exception, E, and something very vague, maybe just like a error has occurred, so system.out print line, and error has occurred. And just for us to know specifically what kind of error occurred, we'll go ahead and still print out the class and the message that comes with this. So let's go ahead and do, so it's E, and again we could do get class, and let's just concatenate this with our message. Same thing, E, but get message. Alright, so we already have our try catch statement for what we're going to deal with. Now we could go ahead and start writing the code within the try statement. So again, we are working with files, so handling a file, again, prone to errors. Maybe a file can't be created properly or written to properly and such, so that's why we want this. In the case of wanting to, let's say, create and write to a file, we're going to use something called a file writer. So we're going to do file writer, and I'm just going to call this writer. And again, since this is a class, we're going to do new file writer. There we go. And within these parentheses, we're going to go ahead and actually indicate a file to write to. So let's call this test.txt. There we go. So this kind of works like a scanner. So notice in the scanner class, that's our way of being able to get user input down here in the console. Writer is basically our way of either accessing and creating a file, as indicated here. And this is going to be our template to work on. So this is our interface to be able to, actually write to this file, hence file writer. So now if we want to write to our file, we could just go ahead and do writer. So you're going to get the name, and the function is going to be called write. Oh, and notice it fills in with a null. In here is supposed to be any text you want to write in. So in this case, let's just do a hello world. Okay, so I pulled up the workspace for this specific package. So this specific package, week 6, again, that's wherever you're putting your code for this. So I've opened up here because this is actually where the file is going to be created. You would think that it would be within, like in here, src, we go in here at this level, but whenever we're on Eclipse, whenever Eclipse creates a file, it's going to create it at the base of this class. So if you're using Eclipse, just understand that. But if you are, like, let's say, just executing it through a command line, so using Java through the command line, running it, compiling it, it'll appear right at your directory level. So just know that. So let's go ahead, and right now you see there is no test.txt. But now if we run this, there we go. It says end of program because that's the only thing we're outputting, and it seems like there's no errors because we don't get the message down here. If we look back here, we now see that there's a test.txt, and if we open it up, there is nothing because there's actually one more thing we have to do, Oop. And actually a fatal error on my part is every time you have a writer, you always want to make sure you close it. So writer.close. Anytime you open up a file, it's being accessed to by the program. If you leave it open, it's like leaving a door open, and it won't be good for your memory. So just make sure you're always closing it. So now if we do this, let's go ahead and run it one more time. Everything seems to work smoothly. Now if we look in our test, there we go. Now we could see the hello world. And again, that's because you need to make sure the file's closed. Get the job done, close the door, everything is good. Perfect. So yeah, you could go ahead and format different writes. In some cases, maybe you have data. Let's say maybe you're processing data and you want to put your output there. You could go ahead and do that as well. And notice that it's not creating any more test files. That's because, again, what FileWriter does is it'll either search if a test.txt exists, so that kind of file exists, it'll write to it. If not, it'll go ahead and create one. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's see if we, let's add in a couple of more writes. And just make sure that you're structuring things properly. For instance, we have our escape cases. So -n, again, with our strings, that'll create a break line, a new line. So now if we run this, everything seems to have gone smoothly. Run test, there we go, we see hello world, blue and red. Now, if you think if we're writing to it, what happens if we run it again? Will it just add, will it add another hello world, blue and red? Well, let's see. So it ran, looks good. And in here, you see that, no, it's still the same thing. That's because anytime we're writing to it, it's going to basically overwrite the entire text file. So it's going to go through, keep as a blank slate, and write whatever you ask it here. So just make sure you keep that in mind. Okay, so we've written this to a file. Now what if we want to read something from a file? So like right now we have test that exists, the test.txt. What if we want to read in that data again and maybe do more stuff with it? So down here right below, so again this is to write to a file. And then down here, we're going to read a file. So we're going to get the information from it. Now, a recommended way to go about this is actually to use the file class. So remember in our file IO, in our java.io, that's a way in which we get input and output. The file class is specifically under that package. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to create a new file, and we're going to call it lowercase file, and a new file. And then within here we have to get the name of the file. So it has to be in an existing file, otherwise you will get an error. So it needs to be a test.txt. So let's go ahead and just put in test.txt. There we go. So now we have an object, and this basically depicts the file. This has the contents of the file, and we could go ahead and read through it. Now exactly what format it takes, it's basically, again, it's an IO interface, very much like the console. So we could actually treat it with the scanner class. So let's go ahead, and in here, we're going to create a scanner class. std in new scanner, but instead of doing our system.in, which again is our console, we're going to go ahead and use this file object. And then just like that, we could treat it pretty much like if you have a user input, except it's existing. So in this case, let's say we want to print out everything. Let's say we want to print out everything within the test.txt, so every line. So if we want to go through it, we could go ahead and actually create a while loop. So let's do while. And of course here, within here, we're going to have some kind of string. And let's just call this text. And we're going to use the scanner std in and just say next line. There we go, and we'll go ahead and just print out, let's grab this, and we'll print out the text onto our own console. Yep, not that text, the variable text. Cool. And now the question is, well, what exactly do we put in here if we're trying to like read through it? When it comes to the scanner class using a file object, we could go ahead and use a method called hasAnextLine. So it's able to detect whether we're, like in this case, we're going line by line with taking in the strings, and it's going to go through, it's going to chop its way through the file. Once it reaches the end of the file, there won't be any more lines to take from. So let's do std in dot has next line. So if we've reached the end of the file, this will be true. So there's no more nothing else in the file. We could go ahead and, stop, and it won't read anymore. And just like anything else, since we are accessing a file and you do want to do the same thing with your standard class, we're going to do std in, and we're going to close it. So now let's go ahead and run. And we could see, there we go, we could see parts of our file in here. If we take a look at test, it's still going to be okay. It just basically, the scanner is going to have its own little pointer. So it's not like getting this text, ripping it away and putting it here. It's just reading through it, and it has its own pointer saying, okay, so we're going to look at the next line, and it's going to take, so first iteration, it's going to take all of this line. So next line, it's going to take all of this line, hello world, including our little new line here. It's going to put that into text, print it out, then go on to the next line. Since there's more lines available, again, it's just pointing. It's going to take this, copy it over, print it out, then go to the next. Take it in, print it out, go to the next. There's no more lines. So now it's going to go ahead and stop, close, end of program. Okay, so those are ways in which you could actually write a file and create one. Now you can see how this could actually be a little bit useful, because we could go ahead and here, let's get rid of our read file. So just the code for reading the file, and let's just create one. So maybe you have a program in which you want to actually create, here, let's call this list, or let's call this data, and it's a CSV. So CSV files, basically you could think of it as like if you work with spreadsheets, so Excel or Google Sheets, you'll know that we could format data. Here, let me show there we go. So we could format data in a way, let me open that image. Perfect. We can format tables in a way where it's basically you go line by line, but every value is separated as a column with commas. So it's the simplest text version of being able to create some kind of mini database. Again, if you're working with values or some kind of calculations, some people, when they're doing research projects, maybe with mathematics or some kind of science, they could create a CSV file and then put it into one of those spreadsheet programs in order to, perform some kind of analysis. So you could do the same here. You could do data.csv, and we could go ahead and do like, hey, this one's name, this one's age, and maybe we're looking at different colors people like. So now we're going to go to the next line, and we're going to say, oh, this person's name is Bob, comma, their age is 56, comma, and they like blue. And the next person is Jenny, and they are 13 and they like red. And so on and so on. You could put in your data. Maybe this is Daryl. Daryl is 21 and they like green. Okay, so now if we run this, you see that it executes fine. And if we go over here, you actually see that in my case, it turns into an Excel sheet. And if we open it, as perfect as day, we have our file basically turned into a table. So again, really neat. And that was us just making up, I didn't declare this as a Microsoft Excel sheet. That's more of my system. So my system did that. But it will create a CSV file with all of those commas. So this could be a pretty great tool. In your assignment, you'll be, taking orders for a restaurant, and it's going to be basically user input, keeping track of some data, and you're going to read from the same file, like how we did here with the file writer and the file object. But if you want to use this in a more practical sense, you could go ahead and, create some kind of data. If you're interested in calculations or keeping track of stuff, you could go ahead and do so here. But again, as long as it's some kind of file that can be readable. Okay, I'll leave that for this video. Again, if you need help, please attend the student hours. And if you cannot attend the times for the student hours, let me know so we could schedule a separate meeting. We are reaching the end of the course, so if you do find yourself struggling, just please reach out. We'll find a way to, make things work out. All right, thank you.